Hello everyone and welcome. It's the BlackShadow. Hope you're all keeping fairly well. This is the third part of our mini-series on the Dune Imperium meta with the Immortality and Rise of Ix expansions. We've talked about Swordmasters, we've talked about Money Men. It is time to talk about probably the queen of Dune Imperium, and that is Tessia Vernius, who since her initiation in Rise of Ix have proved to be a very strong and probably dominant force on the table. It's been weird though for Tesia. When she first came out, actually, not a lot of people really ever touched Tesia. If you look back in the history books to our first ever competition, the Art of History tournament, Tesia, I don't think in that first round was played by really anyone. But as the group got more experience and got more comfortable with the game and started exploring more, Tesia found for more and more use, and people started to realize how really, really good she is. And even though she probably maybe peaked with the Rise of Its expansion, in the shipping meta, she still proves to be a very dominant force with immortality, though the reasons for that have changed maybe slightly, but we'll talk about that. So in this video, we're going to look at a bit more detail to Tessia Vernius, why she proves to be pretty effective with immortality, the strengths that she brings to the table, and I guess importantly, what to do against a rampantezia, because on the face of it, it's a pretty intimidating sight, but I think there are some strategies to be had here, and much like the case with Ilban in the last video, I think it's a case of proactiveness, because yeah, once Tessia Vernius gets going, it's pretty scary stuff. Those of you like what we do here on the channel, with not just review videos like this, we do game commentaries, we do analysis, forwards, we've got the Spy Satellites podcast that CJ mainly hosts. You can support us on the channel, we've got a Discord, and a Patreon, it's all linked in the video below, and the more of you that support the channel and watch what we do, the more that we're able to do as well. So come and join me. Let's see what the Queen's got for us. So in order to talk about Tessia Vernius, we need to explain how she works. And on the face of it, it's kind of scary. There's a lot of text. If you're new to the game, you might not quite understand what it does. But it actually, when you break it down, is not too complicated. So let's explain this first. Basically, the way Tessia works is at the very start of the game, as you're doing your game setup, is you get hold of 4 snooper tokens playing as Tessia. They'll come with you. They will look something a bit like this. And what you do is you put one of those on each of the 4 factions. What basically happens is as you go through the various course of the game, as you pick up, you go through, you get hold of your influence bumps, and you're fairly happy with that. Once you get hold of a second influence bump and get the friendship point, you go and get the bump, you get the point as per, but you also collect the token on that specific faction. And then what you go ahead and do is you then start laying them down on this list here, and you claim the reward of what you're about to cover up. So for getting 1 token, you get the ability to discard a card in order to get hold of a bonus spice. It's okay, it's fine, it's nothing too much to write home about. But of course, as you start going down the board here and you start getting more and more rewards, they get more and more extreme, and it starts to snowball. So let's say you get hold, a little bit more influence going on, maybe you shift away a little bit of your ring or anything like that. You get hold of your second bonus, you get hold of that token. Let's have a look. Well, now you gain the bonus from the token's influence track, and it's referring to is the bonus you would normally get for getting the alliance. So in this case, the Fremen, you get hold of some water. That's not bad. A bit of water on the house is pretty good. Water is very useful in this game. It has a lot of uses, research station, mining spice, lots of good stuff there. But then it starts getting ridiculous. The third one is gain 1 influence on this token's influence track. And what that means is that if I say go to the Bene Gesserit here, and I get hold of token number 3, that single bump turns into a double bump. And God forbid you had a double bump, that turns into a triple bump. That's pretty scary. And then the final one is not only do you get the extra bump, you also gain the bonus as well. And so if I go here for the Emperor, not only am I getting hold of the point, not only am I getting hold of an extra point, but I'm also gaining 2 troops at the same time, so I can look to put those into the field of combat. And you can see here that as you cycle through these tokens, these powers get very, very powerful very, very quickly. Now, a big part of Tesia's play is revolving around the use of her Signet ring and her duplicity ability. Now, again, on the face of it, it's actually pretty simple. Whenever you play a ring, you can take a bump down on any influence track of your choice, and you can then use that to gain an influence with a faction where you have yet to collect the snooper token. So the basic principle of this would be, let's say I go to the Signet ring, say, do whatever I want to do with it. I can take a bump down on any faction I want. It doesn't matter. It's any random bump down on any faction here. Let's say I want to bump down the Emperor at the moment, and then I can then take the bump with a faction where the snooper token still persists. So, for example, I could take the bump up with the Hardy Warriors, so I could get that friendship point, get that snooper token, and get hold of that water over there. But I can't use it on the Spacing Alliance because it's already gone. I've already got that token, so that is no longer available to me. So as the game goes on, you do have less and less options with duplicity, which is something that I'll talk about a little bit more here. But it does have a lot of very interesting uses. So let's take a couple of examples here. Let's say that I've got my Signet ring here, and I will use this to get hold of my final token for the Emperor. This is a pretty common move. The idea being that you would go to, say, a city here like Carthage, you'd get a troop, you'd send these 3 in, and then what you would then look to do is duplicit in order to get hold of this token. This allows you to generate the 2 troops from the Emperor, and so those can also go into the conflict. So suddenly a city, you're deploying 5 troops, which is pretty damn good. So, there's a couple ways that we can do this with our ring. In this situation here, you can see that we've got, like, the Spacing Alliance. We are well in front, comfortable, no one's in any danger, so we can feel pretty comfortable, and what we can do here is dropping our reputation with the Spacing Alliance, because we maintain the Alliance, it's a free bump for us to use, and then we can use that, gain that token, get ahead of green here, and then maybe look to even push on and take the Emperor Alliance here. Sounds pretty good. But the beauty of Tesia's Signet Ring is that you can do so many more things than just using up spare bumps. If you're creative and a little brave, you can really make tons of use out of this. So let's say it's the same situation again here, but, well, I don't have my extra bump here with the Spacing Alliance. Well, that's a little bit awkward here, but I still feel pretty confident that if I go back here, I can probably save the Alliance again. So what I can opt to do is I can still drop my faction Alliance here. I give up the Alliance point, that's now gone, that's a concern, and I still use that to get hold of my snooper. So I'm basically breaking even on points, I get my token, I get my troops in, but what I'm allowing myself is to then find my way back to the spacing. Maybe I've got an intrigue that lets me get a bump here, maybe I'm about to cash in some shipping next round so I can reclaim this situation here. And the great thing is, of course, is that if you ever take an Alliance and then you drop it, and then you go back up, you reclaim the benefits for it as well. So you get the money twice. This can be very effective for stuff like, say, the Bene Gesserit, where you can get hold of multiple intrigues. A very common move that Lannister loves to use is the intrigue finesse, if we find it here. And what finesse does really allows you to do is allows you to drop down with any faction to go up with any faction. And the cool thing for finesse is that this can actually be the same faction. So a very common Lannister move, for example, would be to sit on 4 persuasion with the Emperor Alliance, for example. You send troops in as you normally would do, but what you do is you use finesse, you go down, and you go up again, reclaim the Alliance, get 2 extra troops, and just use the throne of combat. Very simple, but very effective. But of course, there's yet more uses for duplicity. So let's say that it's a similar example, but maybe Yellow's got an extra bump here. Maybe they went Highliner to send some troops in. They're not necessarily challenging the Alliance, but, you know, if I stay here, they're not going to take 2 bumps. But if I was to drop down, it'd be very easy for them to take the 1, because, of course, then you don't have the Alliance. They've just got to get to 4 persuasion first, and they will be able to take the faction away from us. So let's say that's not an option to us here. Well, let's look at our other influence tracks here, and let's look at the Bene Gesserit, for example. So we've got 3 persuasion here. We got this because we claimed our previous tokens. We've got a spare bump here. Blue got very nervous about that. They already had the Alliance here, so Blue has gone and buffed it up fully. We're never taking this Alliance here, but we never really tried to. But what we've got is a spare bump, so we can easily just sacrifice that bump with no penalty to ourselves and use that to get hold of the Emperor reputation so that we can go and get the troops in as per previously. But of course, there's even more uses for duplicity that you can think of as well. Let's take this example where maybe Yellow did actually steal the Alliance, you know, a bit out of nowhere with the help of some intrigues, maybe a move we didn't expect, we just missed something, maybe the influence bump on here, finds a triple bump, steals our Alliance down. That really does suck. Well, it doesn't better, because now you've got all this influence you're doing nothing with. So now we can use our ring. We say, all right, we've lost it. That's a shame. Well, I guess I'll just drop down there, and I'll use that to go for the Emperor Alliance. And now this alliance I'm 100% going for, because I've got nothing else to fight for. And we get those troops in. And the point I'm trying to make here is that Tessia's Signet ring is incredibly powerful, and it's really super versatile. You can use it proactively to try and put pressure on alliances. You can have situations where you can choose to race someone for alliance. If you win it, great, you get the point, and if you don't, who cares? You can then just simply shift all of that spare persuasion to the other factions to get hold of your points. Almost like a pseudo spy satellite style. It is super effective. And of course, the issue with Yellow here is that if he's going to fight for this alliance, he knows he's going to have to go for all 6 points here on a track that he doesn't really want to visit very much. And if he wins it, all right, he gets the point. But now look at his persuasion. It's tanked. It's going to take him forever to recover those points here. And Tesia, she doesn't care. She can just simply shift away. This is why a card like Shifting Allegiances is so incredibly powerful. Shifting Allegiances is basically this, but the next step. Costs you a bit of spice to do it, but dropping down for the 2 bumps on any faction you want is incredibly powerful. It threatens every alliance in the game unless it gets sealed. And the thing is, even if they pressure you and you have to spend a lot of time defending the alliance, well, once you're there, you've got damage you've got to recover. And God forbid that, say, you're the person. Let's say that Yellow uses Shifting Allegiance here. Let's say this is not Tesia. Let's say this is Paul Atreides for a second. God forbid that you're the one that was going for this alliance, and then Ikaz managed to steal this alliance away from you, and this is just sitting here, and you can't do anything with it, and it's just all that effort almost effectively gone to waste. It's a pretty uncomfortable spot to be in. In addition to the power that duplicity can have on the board, it also has some other interesting side effects. And this is a really good example. Let's say you're just playing in a game, typically with Tessia Vernius, and let's say that this is the Imperium row that you're faced with. Now, there's a lot of nice cards here. You know, Replacement Eyes, Phylactery Researchers are good cards, nice grafting. Gurney Halleck is a very, very strong card. Fremen Camp, loads of troops, getting used to that spice. Gene Manipulation, culling your debt down. These are all good cards. But of course, what's the thing that's missing all of them? There's no faction access. And so while, of course, all the players on the table have an issue here in that they're going to be struggling to actually hit these spaces apart from their diplomacy and their one-time Seek allies, Tesia doesn't necessarily care as much. Because she has her Signet ring, she can pseudo-use this as in the place of faction accesses, and she can use this to still pick up our snooper tokens, even if there's virtually no access on the table. Now, this is admittedly less relevant in Immortality because of atomics and the ability to just simply rip out the row. But in Rise of Ix, this did come up from time to time. You'd have these situations where the row is very, very quiet, or maybe it's a really bad row. Scouts, Sardaukar infantry, very, very not pleasant cards. Well, suddenly Tesia's ring goes up in even more value because she's still able to shift that influence around and make maximum use out of that, and players still having a real problem trying to contend with that. Duplicity's effects also do vary where you're sitting at the table, and what people have started sussing out is that Tessia Vernius in 4th position can be a real hassle as well. The great news is, of course, that if she's in the opening row of pillars, like, no one can choose her before you, and no one's going to know that you've got her, which is handy. But the extra thing is, as well, is that it puts a lot of pressure on the 2nd position. Let's take a pretty standard opening here, where player 1 goes smuggling, because they're scared about green going double smuggling, getting hold of shipping, getting hold of Swordmaster immediately. You know, you've got the skirmish there, that's a bit concerning. And player 3 decides, I want this victory point, I'm going in for it, so they go heavy here. The great thing with Tessia Vernius is that, although in theory, and what is perceived as one of the problems, especially in the prior game, in just Rise of Ix, is that if player 2 just goes shipping this round and shipping next round, then they're just going to dominate it. Players are realizing there's a lot of other ways you can get hold of this 2 persuasion, this faction. And Tessia Vernius is definitely someone who can do that. But again, because of her duplicity ability, we can just go ahead and take a faction visit to anywhere. Steel Suits is a good example to, like, say, monopolize that, maybe put a troop and see what happens. And then what we do later on is we just go anywhere we possibly want, anywhere on the table, even just like Imperial Basin, we pick that up, and then we can just drop that, and then we can go to the to the Spacing Guild here. And so even if Helena does go there second round, we're still going to be able to cut her off sooner rather than later. If we're in first position, we can cut her off even more aggressively. And it doesn't even matter, you know, maybe we've got a situation we've got both our diplomacy cards. It doesn't matter, because then next round we can just Signet Ring and we can put that second faction access wherever the hell we want. It doesn't really matter, because then in seat 1 you can then go fold space, knowing that you can shift very soon, get hold of the shipping access and cut the green out of it. There's loads and loads of different uses for this. It also shouldn't be ignored that effectively, by getting hold of these various tokens, that you are just generating resources passively on the side, and with no one really being able to do much about it. And I'm not just talking about like getting hold of the spice for a discard, which is obviously a resource, but you know, but those bonus bumps on the research tracks and whatever bonuses you get from the tracks, be it money, be it water, troops, whatever the hell you go, these are all resources that are given to you for not really too much effort. And if you're playing Tessia Vernius, you should always be targeting to get hold of all 4 snooper tokens, and with Immortality and the Rise of Ix, there's not really any reason you shouldn't get hold of all snooper tokens before the game is over. There was the occasional game on Rise of Ix where sometimes you might be able to get 3 but really struggle for the 4th, but there's now so many ways to get hold of wild bumps, be it from text, be it from there, be it from the deck. There's so many things that give you bumps here now. You know, Clandestine, Surgeon, Web of Power. I'm just looking through Firm Grip, Shadows. There's so many things that give you bumps for not doing a whole lot. It's kind of crazy. And then you've obviously got the row here as well, which gives extra faction access. And while none of these might not, some do directly give you faction bumps, a lot of them give it to you indirectly. You know, Golo lets you, you know, maybe get a double bump out of something that you didn't otherwise. You know, Scientific's going to get you to that earlier. You've got cards that let you go to faction spaces via grafting. You know, Twisted Mentat lets you get more actions. You literally just pull cards off the row and do them as faction access cards, or give things that give you bumps like For Humanity, that sort of thing. So there's a lot more ways now to get to this. And as such, being the first person to shipping is not quite as good an advantage as it used to be. Although, of course, hitting the shipping spaces with your experimentations is not a bad idea. And, of course, in this situation, what if, you know, we're obviously threatening to go shipping. Helena's set up to do it, but what if, say, she can't go shipping next round because she's drawn both her diplomacies? It happens about a quarter of the time. And in this situation, well, she's not going there next round. So is Kaz going the next round? He might. He might not. He might have both his diplomacy cards. I don't know. Okay, he doesn't this time, but is he really going to go full space next round? Is he that interested in doing it? He might do. He might not. He might want to go Wealth to get Mentat. He might want to go Still Suits to recover his water loss. You know, maybe he's going to get some spice, go Selective Breeding early. There's some cards in the very one. They're not always going to go to full space. A lot of the time, they probably will, but, you know, you put them at a position. And again, the thing is, right, okay, they might go fold space next round. Are they going to get to fold space round 3? It's a fresh draw. They have no control over their deck, so who knows? So the question to be asked is, what do you do about Tessia Vernius? Because, yeah, she's pretty intimidating. It's very scary. There's a lot of stuff that she can do, and that can be pretty worrying. If you want a good example of what she can do, we did a stream game, actually, a few days or so ago where I played as Tessia, and we were on complete overdrive. It was some of the best use of Guild Impersonator I've ever seen in my life, but she managed to turn what is, in process, kind of a not very good, kind of indistinct card, and using that to just absolutely run rampant on the board, and it was just a show of Tessia in absolute full force, and there was not really anything anyone could do about it. And again, much like Ilban previously, it goes to show that once she's off and running, she's super dangerous. It's kind of curious as well because Tessia's inclusion in the game, I'm pretty sure, is a response to the game itself, and specifically Baron Harkonnen. Because, of course, while Baron Harkonnen's strength is to get those early bumps at the start of the game and convert those into advantage with shipping dominance, as it turned out, or whatever else, getting hold of alliances, Tessia is much more of a mid-game play. Now, her start is a little bit slow. Her Signet Ring at the start of the game doesn't actually do anything, but sort of like rounds 3, round 4, 5, 6, you know, she converts those advantages that she can generate courtesy of duplicity, getting those tokens, getting those resources, and just that absolute mid-game powerhouse, creating a decisive advantage to try and take the win towards the end of the match. So in my opinion, I think there's three specific ways that you can look to try to blunt the power of Tesia. Because ultimately, you can't really stop her from getting hold of all the snooper tokens and getting hold of all the resources and advantages she gets from that. But you can definitely blunt how effective that is. The first one is, let's talk about the snooper tokens themselves. Now, of course, Tessia Vernius can collect these tokens in any order she so sees fit. But if you watch content on the channel and you see a lot of the better players, there is a typical path that players go down. Not all the time, depends a little bit on the situation, but there's a general path people will take for Tessia Vernius. The first thing they'll do is they'll get hold of the spacing and the Fremen tiles and get those tokens first. Sometimes depends which way around they'll go, depending on turn order. If they're early in turn order, they'll look to obviously get hold of shipping immediately, so they'll look to cash that in so she can start shipping, and then we'll look to get hold of this secondly because the extra water is pretty useful, allows us to maybe like challenge Great Flat, mid-game Hagger Basin, get some water, maybe in a research station for once in a blue moon, and that is going to be definitely useful. Sometimes the way around, if they're looking to make a push for the Swordmaster, maybe they've gone like in this case what they'll do is they'll go Fremen first and then they'll go for the spacing. A possible path might be maybe they go Fremen twice with the still suits, so they get hold of this token. They've since gone Great Flat, Conspire in order to get hold of their Swordmaster, so that's 5 Solari. They need 3 more coins. Well, if they get the snooper token from spacing second, that's the other 3, and that's how they're going to go and get there. But they both converge on the same principle, that the alliances that Tesia will typically take for the bonus faction bumps is the Bene Gesserit and the Emperor. And the reason for that is A, because their benefits are pretty good late game, and B, these tend to be the factions that are kind of less fought over. That varies from game to game, and obviously how card draw comes out, but especially the Emperor is a very good example. This is probably still the least fought for faction in the entire game. In Base Dune Imperium, it probably was the spacing, because shipping just simply didn't exist. And Rise of Ix, it definitely was the Emperor, and I would argue probably still is now, because people don't really like going well for a lot of the time, if they can help it. There's cards that make that better, of course, but you know, maybe you see the other Conspire here and there, but this tends to be a fairly decent faction to target. They also, players like to go for this 4th because it gives them a couple extra troops to chuck into those tier 3 conflicts to try and get those big juicy rewards, those 2 victory points. Of course, is very, very important. So it's fairly common to see a Tessia Vernius will go for like the Bene Gesserit 3rd, put some pressure here, and then hit the Emperor 4th up. So what does this mean for the game state? And if you're playing against Tesia, well, if you think that this is the route that Tesia is going to take, then you've got to prepare yourself for it, because those late game double bumps can be really awkward to defend about if you're still vulnerable. You know, if you're sitting at 2 or 3 bumps on either of these, or even at 4 steps on them, it can be very uncomfortable. She just simply pairs that up with like a power play or some faction intrigues or anything like that. You're going to have a real miserable time trying to defend these alliances at the exact key moment that you don't want to be defending it. So if you're going to be targeting the Emperor Alliance, maybe you want to go for Wealth early, maybe you've got Talaxi Surgeon and there's a Tesia in the game, well, maybe what you should try and do is consider making extra trips here than you normally would do. You know, the Wealth can still be useful. Maybe you're going to go High Council, maybe go Wealth, maybe buy Dreadnought if you're a combat dude, like the Beast Rabar perhaps is an option. But rather than just going to 2 bumps and calling it a day and thinking, I might get the Alliance, if you know Tesia is going to come here towards the end of the game, get in front of her. Don't let her ambush you on this track. You know, take that Alliance, you know, get 4 steps there, get there early, and say to Tesia, if you want this Alliance, you're going to have to fight for it, because I'm prepared to defend this. And that can put people off. Maybe she might not go here. Maybe she'll end up taking the 3rd super token here and then target the Bene Gesserit Alliance, and suddenly it's not your problem. Another alternative, which is admittedly a lot less seen, but can happen, and I have done it occasionally with Tesia as well, and the Guild Impersonator was a good example of basically going really heavy with a faction, unnecessarily heavy with a faction. And what I'll do as a Tesia is I might go up to like 4 or 5 or even 6 bumps with a faction if I'm getting bonus bumps, especially with Impersonator, and then I just simply use Duplicity, and because I'm so far ahead and no one's ever challenged me, I can just safely just shift this away and I can take an Emperor bump. You know, I get more Impersonator influence, I can shift that away, I can go get Bencher's bump, I might get a bump from shipping, I can just take that with the spacing bump, and then I can go and shift that away. Let's get hold of that point now. And this can be really abusable. Now, it is a difficult ask to expect someone to make an effort of challenging this. because of course there's no perceived benefits, and as such this could be a really effective tool for Tessia Vernius just to kind of really take a stranglehold of an alliance, put it out of everyone's reach, and just take influence there, make sure it's never in any danger, and just mess around here. Maybe I can afford to go down with the faction, give up the alliance because no one's near it, and then I cash in my shipping, and then I'm getting more money. Maybe I can take it down. I've got an intrigue that lets me protect it. I've got finesse, I've got the guild bump, and I can go back up and get more money, you know, and you can see how this can get really, really heavily abusable. You need to be really watchful of Tessia Vernius. If she's threatening to do this, spacing is a bit difficult, but of course, if you start putting pressure on this alliance, you know, if blue decides to start shipping, you know, or yellow starts shipping, takes it away from Tessia, and then he just starts gunning for this alliance, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Tessia Vernius. She's not likely to just give it up, but at least what you're doing is preventing her from just absolutely dominating this and just accruing points wherever she sees fit. So the table will benefit as a whole, even if maybe you don't directly, but I can obviously see why players would be a bit hesitant to do this. But I do think ultimately it's just awareness of the late game, especially if you're targeting the Bene Gesserit and or Emperor tracks in a game for whatever reason. Maybe you've got Sayadina, you've got like a Web of Power, you know, you've got Firm Grip, especially Firm Grip as well. If you've got that card and there's a Tessia in the game, you've got to be very prepared to put in some extra work to defend the alliance and just be proactive about it. Don't wait for her to charge at you to then defend, because in round 6, round 7, do you want to be hitting well for round 6, round 7? You don't want to be doing that. You'd rather hit well for, like, say, round 3 in extra time, where at least you've got time to use that Solari for a Mentat use later, or Dreadnoughts, whatever else. Be proactive in your defense, and kind of make Tessia's powers of these tokens. You can't stop her getting these double bumps, and you ain't going to be able to stop her getting this influence bonus, but you can at least stop her being able to threaten alliances at the same time. Now, there is a second possible weak spot for Tessia's game, which is a bit harder to influence, but if you spot it, you can definitely take advantage of. The reason I was spending a lot of time talking about duplicity and the various things it can do is you can see how effective duplicity is and how it ends up forming quite a big part of Tessia Vernius' game plan. As such, she can become very ring dependent, especially if it's a game where there's not a lot of faction access, and as such, she's having to use her reign to kind of supplement that income there. It means that she can become very, very focused around her ring access. Now, obviously, you can't really stop Tessia Vernius playing her ring. I mean, if you look at the board, I mean, even at the very start of the game, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate places, 6 separate places that Tessia Vernius can send a Signet ring at the very start of the game. So you're not going to be able to block her from using the ring very often. But there are some situations where you can make her life a bit awkward, perhaps. So let's take this hypothetical game state. Now, this is not meant to be exactly accurate. I'm trying to convey a point here. But let's say this is the second round of the game. Tessia was first. Now it's Paul to act first here. And we're sitting in Ikaz's seat in the yellow spot. So this is how the turn went. Paul went mining, as did we. We were both trying to get hold of memo callers. He grabbed it first. Damn, that's obviously a bit of a shame. Helena ended up going to fold space because no one had shipped first round. That's how you know this game is fake. And then went secrets because she has no troops here. She doesn't want to get involved in the fighting for this victory point because, of course, both us and Ikaz are sitting here with the potential to do some actual fun in games and have a real war here. She also didn't have any other way to deploy anything, so she was kind of stuck there. So then, the main point I'm trying to focus is on us and Tessia. Now, we have faction access. We can definitely go Hardy Warriors. Tessia Vernius does not have faction access. She went Fremen and Emperor in the first round. But what she wants to do is, because this faction is still heavy to fight for, there's no guarantee Helene's going to find access there next round at all, and she's going to take her chances, is Tessia wants to use her ring. She wants to siphon her influence from here to the Spacing Guild and from here to the Spacing Guild, ideally back to back. And so we have a decision of what we want to do and how we want to fight the situation. She also has no daggers, which we know because we can check her discard. We can see what her hand is. So we obviously want to win the point here, but we are wary that Tessia, if she gets the shipping and no one else is able to particularly conflict her there, she's going to get this round of shipping. She might get this round of shipping. She's definitely going to get that round of shipping, and it's going to be pretty scary. So what do we want to do here? We've got 3 options with our hand because we're definitely going in. We've got both our daggers, which means that we can probably win the conflict here. And we've got 3 places we want to go if we want to deploy troops. We can go Hardy Warriors. We could go Steel Suits, but that opens up her going to a city, so we can't really do that. So we've got Hardy Warriors, we've got Carthag, and we've got Arakeen. As it says the options here. Now, we could definitely go to Hardy Warriors, 100%. We could spend our troops here, pay our water, dump them in, and we're totally happy with that. It's going to be very hard for Tesia to fight this. She'd have to go to Savfk and get lucky with an intrigue, which she might not even bother trying to do. She might just put in one dude, and all this strength's kind of going to waste. The other thing is as well, though, is that, of course, we're now using up our water, which is pretty bad. There might be great flat to fight for. We might have uses for it. We've got plans otherwise. So maybe this is a little bit over the top. So let's say we decide Hardy Warriors is a bit unnecessary, and so we're going to focus on the city spaces here. Maybe we want to keep hold of the water. Maybe we're looking to go steel suits next round. Chance for great flat. That spice is building up quite nicely. Is green going to go that often? Maybe, maybe not. They've got to find the access. It's hard to know. So we've got Savfk and Arakeen. Only two places we can go here. Now, obviously, we have a choice what we want to do. We could definitely go to Arakeen. We may want to cycle our deck now. Maybe we've got a pretty nice card we picked up early, like Benny Talaxa Researcher, or maybe something like a decent reveal, Fremen Camp or something, or who knows what. Maybe we've got like Web of Power, we want to cycle it through. There could be reason to go Arakeen to draw here. But we don't have to. We know we've got the swords, and we know that Tesia doesn't. So maybe we go with Savfk instead. Of course, the intrigue's pretty good. We're going to put 3 troops in. That's a pretty nice draw. And we say, all right, we're going to rock and roll. Now, obviously, we're getting the victory point here, and that's the whole point here. But there is an extra side effect here, just to consider, and I wouldn't say make this move because of this, but it's being aware of how your actions impact what else happens. So if Tessia Vernius wants any of this money here, which she would like, maybe she wants to go with the influence, and importantly, let's say that she wants to use her signet ring. Where's she going? Well, let's look at the board. Where can Tessia Vernius go with this signet ring? Well, I only see one place. And she might do that, Obviously, she's going to, maybe she'll go in, she'll Savfk it, Arakeen it, and she'll go ahead and get the troop. And she might put in the couple just to make sure she gets hold second place in tricks. Pretty good. But what happens is now, because of this situation, she's got to draw a card. And what that means is she's then got to go ahead, she's got to shuffle this. Maybe it's got like a, like a liaison in it or something like that. She's got to shuffle that. She's got to draw one of those cards. And what this is doing is, even though as Tesia, let's say, all right, I don't need that Emperor Alliance anymore, and I'm going to start making the progress, do the shift towards spacing, threaten it. Well, there's a problem in the plan now. When you're next going to see a signet ring? Because now, when she goes ahead and reveals her turn, obviously these 6 cards are going to go into the discard pile, and then she draws her next hand, she's going to draw these 4, and then she's going to draw 1 out of 6. And it's very easy, in this situation. Like, green could just go to fold space next round. I could just go to fold space next round if I find my Diplo. And if Tessia Vernius doesn't find her signet ring, oh dear, suddenly shipping completely out the question, and now all of a sudden she's getting cut out of it. So, again, I wouldn't just make the move because you're forcing Tesia to have to redraw and find a signet ring, but it goes to show that in the early game, her signet ring is really powerful, and one of Tesia's advantages is that she can be in kind of awkward spots, and her ring will get her out of the jam. Well, if you can force her to have to take a dice roll on whether she finds the ring or not, if she doesn't find it, then that is going to hurt a heck of a lot. So this is another thing that you could consider. Maybe, you might want to do the redraw to get hold of something nice, but, you've got a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 draw on yourself. Why take the 20% if you can force blue to take it instead? And there is one other thing I want to make mention of for Tessia Vernius, which I think gets missed a lot. And we also talk about how, she's a real mid-game beast. I wouldn't say that Tessia Vernius is a late-game player. There are some that are like that. Una Moritani, for example, is a fantastic late-game player because of her farm delivery ring. Is usable to the end. As long as you got the money, those wild bumps and bits and pieces are really valuable. Beast could be a very dangerous late-game player because once he gets that alliance going and he gets that ring rocking and rolling, he can throw tons of dudes into combat, that sort of thing. Tessia Vernius is, of course, not that at all. Because while in the mid-game, it's brutal because she's getting these snooper tokens and she's challenging alliances, you got to remember, the more tokens she gets, the less use she has of duplicity. And of course, once you've got all 4 tokens, that's it. She's done. She has no more abilities. She's got all her tokens, and she can't duplicate anywhere. So once that 4th token gets taken for Tessia Vernius, she is a blank piece of card on the table, and that's it. She is, in theory, I say this jokingly because I know some of you are going to make noise. Technically speaking, once she's got her 4th token, she becomes the worst leader in the game because she has no abilities. At least everyone else can at least passively make something. Ilban can get hold of money. Memnon can make spice. Ariana can get cards of the card draw. Anything like that. All of a sudden, Tessia Vernius has no abilities. And she is relying on her deck. And she's relying on the damage she did in the mid to late game and being able to use those advantages to get over the line with Spiceless Flows or a battle win or anything like that. If she's not gotten to a good state, and if you've maybe blunted off those alliances because the table were very defensive and made sure to protect those, and if Tessia can't take alliance in the last 2 bumps, she's in trouble. She's in real trouble. And I think this is the one big weakness for Tessia Vernius. If no one takes care of their alliances and doesn't protect them, she can just rip them up. This was her massive strength in Rise of Ix because people were very happy just to sit on 4 persuasion and just hope that's good. And then Tessia Vernius came into the game and just ripped up the brawl book and said, no, I'm going to absolutely ruffle stomp you. Immortality has changed a little bit because there are more ways to get hold of persuasions and for the various reps for the guilds. Players do tend to bump to 5 a little bit more nowadays and are a little bit more protective, but especially for Tessia as well, if the table goes pretty faction heavy in spite of her and just says, all right, I'm just going to take his alliance and protect it, green takes the alliance, protects it, Tessia might get 1 alliance. Obviously, that's all well and good, but Tessia needs more than 1 alliance, really. If you're going for a Tessia Vernius game and you only get 1 alliance, that's probably not good enough because all of a sudden, all of this advantage you've got from all these tokens and all these influence bumps are suddenly not really counting for anything at all. The 1 point that you've got for a faction alliance, everyone's got. And as such, her big strength has just been completely blunted and negated. It's the same sort of principle for a card that has come up in discussion in Immortality as well. And it's kind of a similar idea, and that is Long Reach. Now, Long Reach is absolutely terrifying. If you can get this enabled, for however you do it, via grafting, Bene Gesserit, whatever else, you just get 2 bumps of factions wherever the hell you want. And this is incredibly scary. If someone gets hold of this card, the table has to react, and they have to defend the alliances, and they've got to go heavy, because if players start getting 2 alliances, 3 alliances, 4 alliances, you see it sometimes, they just win games. It's too much of an advantage, and it's just too much on the victory points, and it's so hard for people to try and to bite back, be it in combat, which is expensive, be it with Spice Must Flow, which is expensive and kind of luck drawn. This is the power of alliances, and it's kind of one of the reasons I go very faction heavy in a lot of my games, because when you're hitting these spaces, you're still gaining benefits, and if you're getting these victory points on top, it is absolutely amazing. So it's the same sort of idea, and I think that's the way you want to be looking to counter Tessia. If she's on the table, and you think you know where she's going, be preemptive. Don't wait for her to get those abilities and say, oh god, I've got to defend this alliance. Do it immediately. Blunt her off. Tell her that, alright, you're going to get hold of your 3rd and 4th bumps. I can't stop you doing that, but I can definitely stop it being effective. And, alright, you're going to get a bonus couple of troops, but you're never getting this alliance because I'm at 5 spots. So, what are you going to do with those 2 troops? You're going to go into a combat? You're going to try and win it? I mean, suddenly it's not as appetizing anymore. And I think that is a possible way to look to slow her down. Now, this is not something that I thought I would ever actually say, but the whole thought of Tessia Vernius and having to react to the state of the game and what to expect kind of reminds me a lot of when me and CJ were doing the homebrew leaders, and specifically the game where he played as Shaddam the Fourth. Now, I'm not going to try to draw ties between Tesia and Shaddam in regards of strength. Shaddam obviously is completely crazy. But what Shaddam does is when he's in the game is that it completely changes how the game is played. Because he starts off with all the alliances, but he can't gain any faction access. So it becomes a game of him obviously looking to exercise his initial benefits, and knowing that slowly he's going to gradually lose points as those alliances get taken away from him. Now, it doesn't quite work because Emperor Shaddam is completely busted AF, and as such, he just completely crushed everyone on the table, and it was a pretty miserable experience really for everyone involved. But the point still remains. You have to bear in mind of who's at the table. And I think this is one of the strengths of the better players, is going from just playing your own game and advancing yourself to being aware of what's going on around you, how you kind of fit in the puzzle as a whole, and how what actions you do can impact others. And it could be anything from obviously from just taking someone's alliance to as much as forcing someone to do a card draw when they don't want to do it for a specific reason. If they want to get that victory point in combat, they got to cycle their deck, and they may not want to do that. Maybe they've got all their good cards in their hand, and so all they've got left is like their convincings and their daggers and such. And so if they draw that extra card, they're going to have a miserable next hand, and that's the price they've got to pay. Either they give you the victory point in combat, or they take it and have a really terrible round afterwards. And it's just little things like that, it just takes time, a little bit of awareness, bit of nous, and sometimes you got to gamble a little bit, which is something I'm not afraid to do. But yeah, that's the one thing I would take from the game that we're on show here. Emperor Shaddam is completely busted, but it did make me kind of think about how you've got to be aware of what is happening on the board, and you have got to play the board a little bit here. If someone's running away with the game, you can't just sit there and play solitaire and just buy fast or slows, because you're not going to be fast enough. You've got to be active in trying to stop them. And if there's a Tesia on the board, you've got to know that in rounds 4, round 5, round 6, those two alliances she's not taken the snooper tokens for, she's going to gun for them, and she's going to gun for them hard, and she has to gun for them hard because she's got to get alliances. If Tessia Vernius has a game where she's not got alliances, she's lost. It's over. She's got to get at least one, if not two, realistically. So, it's just being aware of it, kind of keeping an open mind in the situation, and trying to react as best as you can. Again, end of the day, you can't stop Tesia from being powerful. She's always going to be good because of the way she's designed. But you can definitely take actions ahead of time in stopping her from being absolutely insane. So my end thoughts are, just don't be incredibly terrified of Tesia. She is scary, and in the mid-game she wields some incredible power. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how good or how strong she is. If you're sitting on 5 influence on that track that she's got a super token on, she's not taking that alliance. And if she finds a way to find 5 bumps, well, she's just going to win the game, and you can't really feel that bad about it, really. That's the way it goes. I've seen quadruple bumps from Tesia's a few times. I think I've seen a quintuple bump once. And it was about as filthy a move. It was like she had 2 faction bumps plus a power play. And it was just like, what are you going to do? Not very much. But outside of those horror stories, I think that's the best way to do it, is just be principled. If she's in the game, you just got to be wary of the situation and know that if you're going to go for those factions, and someone's going to go for them, because you just cannot let Tesia have those for free, that you got to be prepared for a fight, and you're doing everyone on the table a favor. Even if it doesn't feel like it immediately, just take the extra wealth bump early. You'd be surprised the effect I think they can have overall. Regardless, that is going to be it for this then. So again, hope you guys have enjoyed. Hope you found it useful. I'm sure there'll be tons of comments in the YouTube section saying, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's terrible. Sub 1,000 ELO player," which is true, but I couldn't give a damn. I like to think I've played the game enough here, and I think I like to think what I'm saying here is not even it's not groundbreaking in any stretch of imagination. It's just solid principled play. And again, if you're that worried about someone or a person being a certain character, then don't wait for it to be a problem. Act before it does. It's usually a pretty good principle in life, really. Anyways, take care of yourselves. We'll see how the meta shapes up in the future. We've, of course, got the next big competition for the channel coming out very, very soon, which I'm looking forward to. And while we've obviously seen some action with the Water of Life and the Salt Throne tournaments, I think getting the data and seeing the games from the next big comp here on Hidden Assets is going to be very, very enlightening to see where the game stands. And, of course, we're not all that far away from the next expansion for this game. We don't know quite what's going to be part of that yet. I guess we'll find out in time. But I suspect it could be a very interesting world indeed. Looking forward to it. Take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.